What is up, friends? How are you? My name is Stacie, aka In Bed with Danny, D-A-N-I. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for watching. And before we get started, I just want you to like this video. Okay, anyways, so to jump right into it, I was scrolling on Instagram because what else do people do in their free time other than scroll the internet? Anyways, so I stumbled across this video from Stefan Speaks, who is an author, speaker, relationship coach. I'm pretty sure you have seen him, heard of him, whatever. Anyways, his video was essentially saying that don't ever get in the position where your partner thinks that you will not leave them. And I'm horrible at explaining things, so we are just going to allow you to watch it and then we can talk about it after that. So here.
Your partner thinks you're never going to walk away from them. No matter what they do, you've lost. That's a horrible place to be in. We have to get to a place where we both understand that as long as we show up the way that we need to show up for each other, we have each other's back.
About it because, you know, the reality is that we actually do stay in relationships longer than we need to out of just so many different reasons, like security, comfortability, like shared finances, whatever the case might be. And if you guys know and you have been following me, you know that I am a divorced, beautiful human being. And I have actually been separated from my ex-husband for 5 years. Wow, like time just flies by when you're having fun. Actually, our first separation happened 5 years ago, and I was conned back into it for a series of a bunch of reasons. I end up going back, and within 3 months I was like, yeah, no, this is not it. This is not going to work, and I left. But let's just bring you back to the perspective of the first time I left. Like, I feel like the only regret that I had is not leaving sooner. And the reason why is because, like, he genuinely thought I was a joke. Like, he genuinely thought I was a joke. Because, right, like, there was an element of just being like, I want to stay committed to my marriage. I want to just, like, really, like, thug this out, like, for God, and really, like, be like, okay, I'm a prayer warrior, like, we're gonna overcome this, like, you know, my husband's gonna, like, all of a sudden magically start loving me, like, this is the person that I should destined have been with. But the reality is, like, I married my trauma, guys. Like, no one really takes into consideration of just being like, if you are going after a relationship when there are already elements of brokenness within you that you haven't actually fully uncovered, you are going to crash head right into a relationship that is going to ultimately either push you into greatness or is going to actually destroy you. And I feel like that is where I was at. I wanted love, like, I wanted acceptance, but I didn't realize that there was, like, this baggage of trauma that, like, I had carried and stored and pretended like it didn't even exist. And so in that relationship, I felt like I was ultimately seeking something that, like, I wouldn't even be seeking at this point in my life where I'm actually healed. But the reality is just, like, he genuinely thought I was a joke. And I remember very specifically, I remember the last time where I was like, I'm done, and I had, like, had the green light to go. I remember having the conversation of just being like, I'm moving out, like, I found an apartment, like, me and the kids are going. And he was just like, yeah, you've said that before, and was just kind of like unfazed by it, unbothered by it. And the only reason why he was so unfazed and unbothered by it is because I had allowed him the idea that no matter what he took me through, like, no matter the abuse, no matter anything, that I was willing to fight through it for him, and that me saying that I wasn't leaving, like, would leave was an actual joke. Like, he genuinely laughed in my face of just being like, okay. And the reality is, like, there was the sick and twisted part about all of that is that, like, I was secretly hoping that he would ask me to stay. like knowing that like he had already broken my spirit, like knowing that there was like no coming back from a lot of the stuff that was like happening in the relationship, and knowing that like God was like, okay, like this is your exit, like let me move you into a place where there's like healing. And I was hoping that the person who broke me was like would convince me to stay. And that's how messed up trauma is that like you know a situation is bad for you, you know that that's not the relationship that God has ordained for you, and even still you're just like, pick me, like see me like in my brokenness. But I was like expecting someone to repair things that he had no business repairing in the first place because he wasn't even qualified for it. And I get so many like, the messed up thing like in the Christian church is that we're so quick to condemn divorce, but we don't condemn the abuse that is happening in that situation. Like we have to like know genuinely like when to discern like whether God is being like, it's time to wash your hands in this situation. And the reality is like, if I would have stayed in that situation, I would have been not only like gone to the point where like I could have ended my life. Like there was vivid moments where I just remember like having these like visions of like killing myself, and that's somewhere that I have never been in my entire life. Like I was just numb to the fact and truly just like existing like without any emotions in me. And it was like, okay, I'm trying to stay for the marriage, like I'm trying to stay for the kids, like I want my kids to grow up in a two-parent home, but what's more important, like you staying in a house just for the sake of having two parents in a home, or leaving knowing that you're actually going to be a single parent, but what happens is what is gained in that situation is that your kids don't actually have a contorted view of relationships and what that is. The reality is like me and my ex co-parent so much better than we were ever married, and my kids weren't impacted by it. They weren't like, Juliet was like so young, so it didn't necessarily like, she didn't even understand what's going on. But I just remember like holding her at night like crying, and I'm just like, I don't want this for my daughter. Like I don't want her to think that this is normal, that like people who are married sleep in two different rooms, like that like we're fighting and arguing and calling each other all of these names. Like it was just a toxic environment, like not only for me but also my children. And so I knew that like in order to preserve their innocence and their perceptions on what relationships is or isn't, like I knew that I had to separate myself, no matter how like hard it would be, like financially, no matter the stresses, no matter the strains that I would now be putting myself in to like carry a burden that genuinely wasn't originally mine to begin with. And so at the end of the day, we genuinely have to like be better about like vetting partners. Like I think we want love so bad, and we want to be loved and accepted so bad that we're willing to compromise ourselves, our morals, our wants, and our needs for the sake of being in a relationship. And there is nothing that you can gain in a relationship if you are constantly losing yourself. So now when you date, or even before you start dating, like, and this is something that like I had to do for myself, is I made a list like of negotiables, non-negotiables, and I genuinely prayed for the person that like that would soon be my spouse, like, and I made that very intentional and offered that specifically to God himself. And the reason why I needed to do that is because when loneliness encompasses us and we get to a place where we're just like, I feel lonely, I'm willing to accept anything for the sake of companionship, I always revert back to those lists of being like, what did I say that I desired in a partner? Like, what were some of my negotiables? What were some of my non-negotiables? And as you date, you start to realize that, like, you're no longer dating from the wounded aspect of you because you're not willing to accept any and everything. Like, you're dating from the future understanding is like, I know what God told me. Like, I know what he said, like, in terms of, like, I am never going to allow, like, another man who claims that he loves you to abuse you. Like, I know what God has spoken over my life. And so if I notice that there are elements of that in a relationship, it's easier for me to separate myself at this point if I am not, like, actively speaking on it and there's no change being made. I'm willing to walk away until, like, I actually get the relationship that I know that I deserve. So I just want to encourage you guys all, like, create that list, like, and don't use these superficial things like, oh, this person needs to make this amount of money, like, they need to be this tall, like, they need to be fit. Like, no, like, what is the spirit of the person that you want to actually bring into your life? Like, what are their morals? What are their values? Like, what are some of their shared interests? Like, how do you want them to speak to you, like, speak over you? Like, genuinely, what do you want the relationship that they have with themselves to look like? And, like, how do you want them to accept you as a human being with flaws, whatever the case might be? Like, create those lists of negotiables and non-negotiables. I promise you, you will date so much differently. I hope you guys have a blessed day.